Now, a little bit more about our presenter, who I shared is visiting live from Argentina. So we welcome Steph Szuch. Steph Szuch leads the Career Design Fellowship at Mission Collaborative and supports career changers to build a life of their choosing. With a background in teaching and coaching, Steph has worked extensively with professionals from around the world looking to boost their skills to apply for different jobs, move abroad, or take new steps in their careers. She takes a strength-based approach to help those she works with to overcome limiting beliefs, recognize their potential, and gain the confidence to build fulfilling careers. And like I said, we've worked with Mission Collaborative in the past and work with them year-round to bring our Career Design Fellowship to TERP. So we're so excited to get a little taste of that today. So welcome to everybody. And Steph, I will let you take it from here.
Thank you, Megan. Well, thank you everyone for joining me here. I know that Career Week has a lot of incredible programming, so thank you for choosing to attend this, and please do attend other events, either in person or virtually. And thank you again for joining us here for the Career Design webinar. So what we're going to go through today is what we call the career design process. So this is a philosophy that you can apply in designing the next phase of your career, regardless of what stage of your career you're in right now. As Megan mentioned, we'll have time for questions at the end, but there will be a couple of times where I'm going to ask you to think about a little thought question and jot down a couple of words or maybe a sentence. So make sure before we get started to have some place where you can take down a couple of notes. So if that's paper on your phone, on your computer, just a heads up, I'll give you tiny, tiny mini assignments so that you've got something very tangible to take away from today. All right, let's get started. So let's start by talking about why you might be here in this workshop right now. So at some point in time, and maybe even right now, you have probably felt disengaged, like this person on this slide here. I think everyone has had that kind of moment before. And maybe you're in that kind of position right now where you're feeling disengaged or checked out or burnt out at work. Especially with these last couple of years, it is very easy to feel overwhelmed with work and not feel so connected. And this is a very common feeling. And it's not just specific to these last couple of years. I'm sure many of you experienced this previously as well. And this is probably a big part of what brings you here today. So this is a very normal thing that happens. Each year, Gallup, the polling organization, does a poll called the State of the American Workforce. And that's where this number comes from, that 2/3 of Americans report feeling disengaged at work. That is like, that number makes me so sad. It makes me so sad and so driven to do something about it. So that is why I am here today, because I think just one by one, we can lower that number and get people to a better place. Because we know that disengagement at work has effects not just on productivity at work, but how you're feeling in your broader life. We spend so much of our time at work and involved in work. So it's just a shame when we're doing something that doesn't really give us energy or bring out the best version of ourselves. So this is why I am so motivated to work with Mission Collaborative to help individuals design more fulfilling careers. Oops. Making a change is hard. That's the next thing here. So you might think like, yes, I feel disengaged, I feel stuck, but making the step from that to what can I do about it is a little terrifying, and you can feel just, what do I even do? So a lot of people struggle with the questions of, what do I even want? How do I avoid starting over? You know, maybe you've got decades of experience and maybe you invested a lot to get a specific kind of credential, and whether that's time or money, and you're not sure if that's going to ever even transfer over into a new path, and that it'll go to waste, that it'll have been for nothing. Other struggles that come up is when could I even have the time? Like, yes, it would be great to make a switch, but how? Like, I just don't even have the time to think through that. And lastly, just feeling overwhelmed by where do I even start? My first little thought question for you, and this is to jot down either mental note or actual note. What is one fear or one obstacle that is in the way of you making a career change? Doesn't have to be the biggest one, but just whatever is the first thing that comes to mind here. I'm gonna give you about 20 seconds to think on this and write something down. And we'll come back to this later. Great. Um, the fact of all of this is that career change is something normal, and I hope to throughout this session to normalize it a bit more. Like this is something that we all will do at some point, likely. Most of us will probably make multiple career changes, but nobody really teaches you how to do this. You kind of are encouraged to make a decision at some point and then follow that path. Here, I want you to come away from this session with a greater sense of security and that it's very okay to make these changes. You're not alone in doing it. And there are tools that can help you think through this process, even if it's a process that you have not experienced before. So, what do most people do? If you're like a lot of people, your first reaction, oh, sorry, scrolling. We're good. If you're like most people, your first reaction when you start feeling backed into a corner or stuck at work is, what do? We just start sending out applications to new jobs, right? Of, okay, I know it's not this, so just, start firing off CVs and resumes to any place that's taking. That's a really common reaction. You find something that sounds mildly interesting and you treat it like a numbers game. Or you set a goal for yourself of, I'm going to apply to 10 jobs this week. And this, while maybe it does lead to something, is an exhausting strategy. And sometimes you end up getting a job offer for a job that you realize like you didn't even want, or it's not actually better than what you were doing. So the second thing that some people can do is working with a career coach. This is generally not a super accessible kind of thing to most people, and it's also not a guarantee that that's going to get you a job. The most common thing that we do in this situation is we just stay in that situation. So you've got the frustration here, and I'm sure this resonates with several of you, is that that gosh, you could be doing more, you could be happier in your career, you could be doing something different, but we just stick in that stuck feeling until one day, perhaps you just wake up and realize, nope, enough is enough, and it's time to do something about it. I hope that that day for you comes sooner rather than later, and that this is a bit of a push to get out of that spot if that's the spot that you are in. So Megan mentioned a little bit about me. My name is Steph Szuch. I am the Director of Program Management at Mission Collaborative. So I lead our team of career experts that support participants going through our Career Design Fellowship. My background is in education and coaching, specifically helping high school students and adults of all ages figure out how to use their strengths in order to create impact in their communities and find internal fulfillment. I believe very, very strongly in the ripple effect that happens when someone finds work that they love and they are valued and respected for that work that they're doing. It's a very important part. I have seen very much firsthand how this extends to the people around them. So if you make that change to be doing something that you care about more, that affects your mood, that affects your energy, that affects how you're engaging with the people around you, and that effect allows things to spread. And it also gives the people around you permission to do the same thing. You know, you can, like, this career change, if you're looking for a career change, can be for you, but also it can have a larger impact of showing the people around you, oh, hey, this is possible. Like, I could also make that kind of change. I could be happier in my career. I could be doing something more fulfilling. So this is why I feel very passionate about this kind of work, because I love to see individuals feeling fulfilled, but I can also see just like this bigger picture of moving towards a culture that really values fulfillment at work. So now that you've got a little bit of an idea about myself, I'll share about Mission Collaborative. We started back in 2017 offering full day career change boot camps, and we got very positive feedback from this. So we moved into a virtual 30-day program to be able to serve more career designers. Since then, we've worked with thousands of participants from various backgrounds, industries, ages, starting in the early 20s to usually mid 60s, mid 70s, though I did have a participant last fall that was 86 years old. And if that is not proof that it is never too late to find fulfillment, I don't know what is. At the end of the webinar, I'll share a little bit more information about what that program is, but we have our next fellowship cohort starting on April 1st. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about that as well. So let's get into it now, the career design process. The high level overview of it is we have these 4 phases. So regardless of where you're at in your career, this process can work because it has the same fundamental approach no matter what stage you're at. The process is inspired by the principles of design thinking. If you are interested in learning more about that, my book recommendation is Designing Your Life. It's an excellent book, and it's very connected to the work that we do, Designing Your Life by Bill Burnett. So that framework, coupled with best practices from career coaching, is kind of the pillars of our program. And we continuously iterate the curriculum based on the feedback that we get participants. But our kind of refined version is this 4-step process: reflection, definition, testing, and launch. And we're going to look at each of these phases here today. So Designing Your Life is the book. There you go. The first phase of the career design process is reflection. And this is about answering the questions: who am I? What do I care about? What am I good at? And what do I want to create in the world? Reflection we start here because this is about understanding the unique person that you are. And the reason that this is so important to start with a deep reflection is to remind yourself of what actually matters, right? And what matters to you. So oftentimes, a person is getting dissatisfied in their work. So they hop to a different job because there's one aspect of it that is better, or maybe it pays a bit better. Maybe the culture is a little bit better, but they still just kind of don't find that deeper satisfaction that they're looking for. And that's often because they haven't taken the time to really step back and identify, what is it that's going to bring me fulfillment? What is it that's really lacking for me here? What do I need that I'm not getting in this moment? The second reason that we start with reflection is to reduce the risk of making a misstep and jumping into something that's not actually a better fit. So we definitely believe it's better to do more work proactively rather than reactively. So putting in that thought ahead of time can really help you avoid missteps that can end up leading you down roads that maybe take you in a different direction for years. The third reason that we start with the reflection phase is because when you have a clear idea of who you are and what you're looking for, it can act as a compass. So we like to use the analogy of Google Maps. Like, it would be amazing if you could just type in a destination for your career and get the exact steps laid out in order of how to get there. But that doesn't really exist. And also, it wouldn't make the most sense either, because oftentimes your destination is changing as things in your own life change. So rather than thinking about career navigation as just making progress to one singular goal, we like to think of it as having a compass that helps you navigate in the right direction. So the better you understand yourself and your motivations and your interests, your values and your strengths, the easier it is to know where that compass is and what is the right direction. So we have 4 key areas of reflection. This is getting into the specifics now. The first is identifying your core values. So all of us have values that serve as the guiding principles that help us make difficult decisions, right? And navigate who we want to be in the world. So this is really important when you're thinking about your career, because if you find yourself in an organization that actually conflicts with your core values, it is hard to feel engaged and hard to feel fulfilled in that kind of environment. As a simple example, I have worked with a number of people who are in very lucrative industries, but don't feel fulfilled because they don't connect on a deeper level with the work that they're doing, or they don't believe in the work that they're doing. And so what's happening there is you've got a conflict of the core values. The second area of reflection that we look at is strengths. So everyone's got strengths, and these are your more natural tendencies of how you show up in the world by default. So this is about how we're naturally wired to think, how we're wired to feel and behave. So leaning into your strengths is going to lead to better results than just trying to avoid your weaknesses. And there's actually a lot of research in positive psychology that suggests that we do our best work when we're focusing on our strengths, and we're far more effective and motivated than when we're trying to avoid or minimize our weaknesses. So that is, please let that be a takeaway here. When you're thinking about strengths, think about what can I go towards rather than thinking about moving away from your weaknesses. So understanding your strengths and being able to name them is very helpful as you start thinking about career moves. So you know what it is that you can go towards and also what you have to leverage here. The third area of reflection here is skills, specifically transferable skills. And these are different than strengths because these are not things that you're hardwired to do naturally. You actively cultivate skills through practice and rigor and intention. So skills are something that you might get a certificate for, something you might study, or something you might learn on the job. So all of us have skills, and most of the skills, many of the skills you have are transferable to other careers. Now, this is a sticking point for a lot of people. Maybe some of you wrote this down in the what is your obstacle that you can identify. A lot of career changers assume that their skills are too niche or too specific, so they can't transfer to a different industry. And this is, broadly speaking, not true. So a lot of the time, this is much more of a branding problem than like a lack of skills problem. So if you can do some work on how you're talking about your skills, that is often very significant in terms of being able to transfer if you're changing industries or changing jobs, really thinking about it as a branding problem of needing a reframe rather than lacking the skills themselves. I'm going to let that sink in for a minute while I drink some water. So finally, the fourth area we've got is acknowledging your interests. Everyone has topics and causes and communities that we care about. And if we're doing work that aligns with those interests, we're going to be a lot more engaged and more fulfilled. And this is something that I always point out to participants in the fellowship, that it's really important to identify not just what you're good at, but what you enjoy doing. Because I think it's easy to mix those two things up, that you think about, oh, well, I'm good at this and this and this. That sometimes those are things that you also enjoy. And sometimes you're just good at them. And so that's what you go towards. But your interest also matters. So this brings me to thought question number 2. Looking at these 4 key areas of reflection, which do you think that you need most right now. And if you want, you can look back to what you wrote from question number 1 with that obstacle or that fear. Where do you think would be a good place to start?
I'm going to say looking at your values, because interests could come and go. So many different things could come and go, but your values are basically your inner being, your inner direction. And if you could always, those other things, items can be molded to match your inner being.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing.
Welcome.
Now, and there's not a right answer here. This is just thinking about your particular situation, which might be the thing that I need to connect with most is my values right now. Excellent. That's your starting point. Maybe if your fear that you wrote earlier is like, I feel like this is the only thing that I know how to do. And so I don't want to feel like I'm starting over. Okay, maybe really diving into your transferable skills and like listing that out. Maybe that's a good place to start. So this is not, I see a question in the chat asking where you're most deficient. We're not looking at deficiencies. We're just looking at where do you feel like, given where you're in your career possibly change right now, which of these 4 just kind of jumps out at you at the most of yes, that is something that I could put some thought into. That feels important for me to think about. And set that aside for now. We will come back to it. All right. So this is the reflection phase. Now we'll move on to definition. So once you've gone through this reflection of who you are, what you care about, then you can move into the second phase of the career design process, which is definition. So definition is all about figuring out what criteria I want the next chapter of my career to satisfy and what are the different paths that could actually bring me there. So here, the first thing I want to point out is that it's very important to know that everyone's definition of success is different. And the fact of just recognizing that can be very liberating. So a lot of us end up in a situation where we're striving for somebody else's definition of success rather than thinking about what success looks like for me as an individual. And that is going to be different. As I said a couple of minutes ago, maybe one of your top criteria is your values, and you really need to be in an industry that connects deeply with your core human values. Great. That's your definition of success. For other people, it's going to be having a different kind of impact or the personal growth, but you get to choose what success looks like for you. And that's something that you can really build in this definition phase here. As you're thinking about the criteria that are important to you in your search for success, whatever that looks like for you. The other thing I want to point out in this definition phase is that there's not a single career path that is going to be completely, entirely fulfilling necessarily. Maybe there is, and that's great and wonderful, but fulfillment can come from multiple different sources. And it's important to keep that in mind, that there's not just like one magical path out there that's just waiting for you to happen upon it. Sometimes you've got to build different sources of fulfillment from different places. So maybe you've got your main job, which requires that fills you up in certain ways and challenges you. And then maybe you've got a little side project that you do that connects more deeply with values. All of that is okay. You can kind of piece things together to get your complete picture of what you want. So we've got here 2 steps to get to clarity. There are 2 steps in the definition phase. So first is defining your career criteria. Now, looking at this list, we're not going to go through each one individually, but looking at this list under number 1, there's nothing groundbreaking about this list in itself, but it is amazing how few people actually sit down to think about the answers to these 8 questions, to think about of these different criteria, what do I care most about? Right? Because everything's going to have trade-offs. It's very difficult to get absolutely everything that you want out of a career, but you can choose what is most important to you and then prioritize that. Start from there rather than, choosing a job title and hoping it fits some of these. This is giving you a starting point. Choosing your career criteria gives you a place to start off, and it's your first filters. Once you've thought about what you want for each of these, the next thing to do, and this is a really great exercise, and we do it in the fellowship, is ranking them. So a ranking from 1 to 8. What number 1 is the most important thing for you in your next career move, and 8 is the least important. So I definitely recommend, we're not going to do it right now, but I absolutely recommend taking the time to do that little exercise. The second step here in definition that we have is collecting career path ideas. So once you've laid out the criteria that you're looking for, the next step is to go out and look for opportunities that are interesting, that align with those criteria. So there are several different ways that you can do this. The first, which is maybe even so simple you don't even think about it, get a group together. This can be friends, family, coworkers, and have a brainstorming session. So you can share with them the criteria that you came up with, maybe the reflections, the values, the strengths, all of this information, share it with them and get their feedback on what possibilities you can look into. This can be very helpful to get out of your own head and rely on those that know us in order to generate some more ideas. Another thing that you can do is do career assessments. These have improved a lot over the last couple decades. So if you took a career assessment in high school and you just said, gosh, this is awful, this is not worth my time, there are much better ones out there. Not that it's going to solve your life, but there are tools that can absolutely be useful to just kind of maybe suggesting some ideas that that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise thought of. One that we recommend, and Megan, if you can type this out for me, is careerexplorer.com. is a comprehensive assessment that we found to be helpful. Beyond that, there's just a lot of information out there online if you know how to look. So if you're looking for changing industries, a good search term is alternative careers for teachers, alternative careers for lawyers, whatever it is that you're looking to potentially transition out of. There are absolutely people who have done that and have written about it. And there's podcasts, potentially, there's blog posts, there's resources. So if you know how to search and you're willing to put in that time, there's definitely resources out there. So with all of this, I'm going to have my third and final question for today. So along with this idea of brainstorming with your people, I want you to think of right now, one person in your life, can be a friend, a coworker, family, whoever, who would be helpful in your career design process. Someone that you could brainstorm with, or someone that could be supportive of your journey, someone who would be a good resource for you in your career design process. I want you to think of that person and write down their name. We will come back to that one at the end as well. So let's move on to our testing phase. This is phase number 3. We started with reflection. We have definition now and our criteria, and we've got some ideas to explore. So this is the testing phase, and this is a step that a lot of people skip, but it's actually tremendously important. So this whole phase is summed up by the philosophy, try it before you buy it. So if you've gone through and identified several paths that could potentially be good fits for you, the next thing you've got to do is to narrow down the options to make sure that you're choosing the right one or the next right one, rather than ending up in a job that's not any better than the previous one that you've had. So that's what we're trying to do in the test phase, is try things out before we commit to something. So this is helpful because it reduces the risk of making a wrong step or of going in the wrong direction. If you try something out a little bit first, you can get a sense of, is this for me or is this not for me, before you fully commit. All right, so we have some different strategies I'm going to walk you through for testing out a career path. We've got here, they range from being very simple, but maybe not the most effective. They're easy to do, but they're going to provide less information, ranging to very intensive and a bigger time commitment. But of course, from those, you're going to get the biggest insight and the most enlightenment. So starting off with the easy stuff, one of the easiest things that you can do is talk to someone who works in that role. That's what it means here with practitioner. So a practitioner is someone who is currently doing the role that you are interested in. Okay, so if you know someone in that kind of job, you call them up. If you don't know, you've got to do a little exercise of networking and reaching out to someone that you don't know. But here, this is a great opportunity to just get a sense of what that role is actually like, because lots of times just reading a job description gives you some information, but talking to someone who's doing that job gives you a much greater idea of what they like about it, what they don't like, what are the challenges, what does the industry feel like? Those are things that you're not going to get from a job description alone. So a lot of people get uneasy with this idea of just, networking, and there's nerves there, and you feel like it can be just so transactional and kind of forced and fake. The idea behind this is to approach it from a humble and genuine place. So this is about asking for advice, but approaching it with humility and, whenever possible, offering something in return. So the idea here is to show up with a curious attitude. So it could be something like saying, if you're reaching out to someone, say, hey, I'm really interested in your work and how you got to where you are. And I'm thinking about, considering a similar career path. I would love to connect for just a couple minutes to learn a little more about your background. And I know that your time is super valuable, so I'd be happy to help you think through any problems you might be tackling or introduce you to someone in my network that might be interesting for you. In that way, you're being transparent about what you want, and you're also offering value to this person in return. Will they take you up on that offer? Who knows? But you have now offered to give value to them as well. And that makes this more of an exchange and can help set yourself a little more at ease. Even though networking can be nerve-wracking for a lot of us. The second testing strategy we've got here is to attend events and conferences. This can be in person, it can be virtual. We've got all of those resources available now, but this is a great space to not only meet people who are working in that space, but just get more involved in the content and the conversations that are associated with that industry. So here you can get a taste of what's going on. The third one here, and this one I really, really want to just stick in your brains, is the idea of doing a test project. So this is something that very few people do, but it's quite accessible if you're willing to put in a little bit of time, and it can give you really good information. So the idea here is to imagine that someone handed you the career or the role that you're interested in, and they ask you to complete a project that you would likely be asked to do in that job. So a tangible example, if your goal, you want to get into graphic design. So to do a test project, I would think about what is a project that I can do on my own time without anyone's permission, but that's also not going to take me too much time. Maybe something I can do over a weekend and do that task. So if I'm trying to get into graphic design or see if that's interesting to me, maybe I give myself the prompt to design a better logo for a company that I'm familiar with. In this case, there's nothing stopping me from going ahead and taking what I know about that career path and about that company and redesigning their logo. This is just my own little project that I'm doing. It's not going to take a terribly long time. And at the end, I've got a work product that I can then share with someone else. If I know someone that's a graphic designer, I can run it by them and get some feedback. And they can, point me in a different direction. But really in this, you're learning about how you feel doing that project. If it was terribly stressful, if you were really unsatisfied with the final product, if any of those, that's an insight that maybe this isn't exactly what you were hoping it was. If you found it exciting, challenging, but exciting, if that's kind of the energy behind it, okay, great. Now you've got some information that you do have like true deep interest in this. So all of this is thinking about what can I do in a couple hours over a weekend that is a piece of what this job would entail. So this is really good information that you can get out of this. And it's easy to think, okay, that makes sense. It was kind of easy, the example of graphic design, but I assure you that you can do test projects for just about any career path out there. Sometimes you have to get a little creative, but putting together a proposal, putting together like a scheme, putting together something will give you a little bit of an idea, putting together a report on something. There are test projects that you can do for just about any career. And finally, and this is the highest intensity one, you can arrange a consulting gig, which is much more hands-on, more involved. This would be finding a company or a client who's willing to pay for your services to complete a project for them. This is going to be super helpful in giving you the information that you want, but of course is a higher investment. So all of these 4 strategies are really excellent ways to just get some information before you commit. But this is the whole idea of it is so important to try before you buy when it comes to your career. All right, we are into our final stage now, which is the launch phase. This is the 4th one. So here is when you actually go out and pursue that next option. So you've done your research, you've reflected on what you want, you've tested out some options, you're confident that you've got a good fit here or a couple of good fits, and you're ready to take that next step. This is the time when you're actually reaching out and applying. But here, you've set yourself up in a much better position, right? Remember at the beginning when you're thinking of like, I'm just not happy with the job that I've got right now. I don't like what I'm doing. So I just start applying to different things randomly. That is very different from reaching this point here. And when you start applying after having gone through those other steps, this is very different because now you're targeting jobs that you genuinely care about, a job that you actually would like to get. And an employer feels that, when you're talking to them, they can tell if you're faking it or if you've got a genuine interest and you genuinely think this would be a good job for me and I would be good at this job. The takeaway that I'd like you to have from the launch phase is about relationships over resumes. So there is like a resume is important, absolutely for sure, but the relationships behind it are huge. So one place to start is to make your short list. So here, this is thinking about organizations and companies that you find exciting. So that you like the product that they make, that you like the service that they provide, and making a short list of who these organizations are before, like regardless of if they've got current job openings. So this is thinking about who you would very genuinely enjoy working for. This is a good approach rather than thinking about what is currently available, because if I'm only talking to places that are currently hiring, it's more likely that that scarcity mindset is going to flip on and that I'm just going to take something because it's available rather than going into it because it's what I really want. So this is, again, that what I said before about it's much better to do this work proactively rather than reactively. So if you're in a place right now where you need a new job immediately, you're probably not going to have the time to go through all of these steps in a deep way. The career design process, it requires some time because one thing builds on the next. And to get to that end point, you really got to invest some time and thought in the previous steps. So in this short list, the idea is you've got organizations that you've already decided are interesting. And the idea is to reach out to someone who works there, someone who would be a peer, someone who would be a manager, and say, hey, I'm thinking about making this career change. And your organization has been on my list for a long time. A huge fan of the work you're doing. I'd love to be valuable to you. I'd love to see how I can help you right now, even when you're not hiring. Again, who knows if they're going to take you up on this, but if you're in a similar industry, you can think about how you could provide value, maybe having a conversation about something topical, something that's going on in the industry and presenting it as a knowledge share kind of thing. Because if you can get yourself into that kind of situation where you've just shown that you can provide value before you're even hired, that's you're going high up on the list here when jobs do become available. So this is the idea behind relationships over resumes. Yes, it takes more time for sure. And you've got to do some work stepping outside of your comfort zone to connect with these people. But the value of it is very much worth it. I've kind of summarized the different steps here together of making your short list, build relationships, and offer value. And then finally, yes, it is good to have some help with your resume and look at all of this. So that is the content that I have for you. I'm going to tell you just very quickly about our upcoming Career Design Fellowship. So we've been running these programs with UMD since 2018, I believe was the first one. So we are in our 5th year of these Career Design Fellowships. The next program is starting on April 1st. It's this 30-day program. So I hope that from today, you've got something very tangible that you can start working on. This is the model that we use during the 4 weeks of the program up through the testing phase. So since it does take time, we go through reflection, definition, and testing. If you were excited about this process and of diving more into this process and feel like you would benefit from having more accountability and working through it in a more slow piece-by-piece approach, we have had a lot of really great feedback from UMD alumni who have gone through this and really come out of the program with a lot more clarity, a lot more connection to the alumni network, and a lot better idea of what's next for me, and knowing that that's something real and that they care about. So see, I think I covered everything. Yes. If this sounds great to you, we'd love to have you join us. And in any case, the things that you wrote down today, you wrote down one obstacle or fear that's in your way. You wrote down a place that you can start, what area of reflection you can start on, and a person that can help you on your way. So at a minimum, you've got those 3 pieces, so you can absolutely get started on your career design process right now. We'll go to questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steph. I appreciate you being here and sharing a little bit about this Career Design Fellowship, but also giving us a little taste here. And so we did have one question in the chat, and I encourage others to add more. We had a question from Kaylin about the projects and the test projects. She asked, would you post these test projects somewhere like GitHub?
I would say the test projects, it depends what kind of test you're doing. But I think you're generally going to have it's going to be more effective if you're sending it to a specific person. So if you've identified an organization that you're interested in, and you've reached out to someone at that company, sharing your test project with them or with someone else in your network or the network of a friend, any way you can reach. But I would say it's going to be more effective if you can send it to a specific person rather than just posting it out there.
Wonderful. Thanks, Steph. Does anybody else have any questions? I encourage you to come off mute and either ask your question off mute, or you can put it in the chat either directly to me or to everybody. There was lots of great content, so I'm sure we might have some more questions.
Okay, I see a question here from John about understanding your strengths and acknowledging transferable skills. formal recommendations, Strength Finders. It's now called Clifton Strengths. Is a very worthwhile tool. It is a paid tool. I think the lowest version is $35. I am a big fan of that tool. One of the co-founders of Mission Collaborative actually worked with that tool at Gallup before founding Mission Collaborative. So it's definitely connected to the work that we do. But even free assessments that are out there often help to just kind of plant some seeds in your mind.
Great question, John. And I know, Steph, you talked a lot about, I put this in the chat, but you talked a little bit about how that fourth step can seem really tricky, especially when you might not feel the most natural reaching out. It might feel pushy. You don't want to, networking can be sticky. So I just want to say out loud for everybody that we do have a session on Friday about Terrapins Connect, which is our mentorship and networking platform. I'll be talking about how you can utilize that to network with other alums. And so I encourage you all, if that networking piece is sticky for you, to come and learn more about Terrapins Connect, and as well as other networking events that we have at the Alumni Association. Okay, we do have a question in the chat as well. What free assessments can you spell out, Jennifer Scott, or maybe places where you can find free assessments, Google keywords?
I'm going to put here in my chat the Mission Collaborative email. So that's going to be something, since it's links and I don't have the list right on hand, but I'd be happy to send your resources. So if anyone wants to reach out to me for that or with any other questions, please do so, and I'd be happy to share that.
Great. Also, we have a point from Catherine that says some public library systems offer access to career exploration resources. Montgomery County does and has assessments included. Great.
Excellent. Yeah, this is just something that there are so many resources out there. There's a lot there, but sometimes it's not so easy to find. So thank you for sharing that resource, Catherine. Public libraries. It's a good thing to look into.
Awesome. Well, if anybody has any other questions, I'll leave another minute or so in the chat, but otherwise, thank you all for coming. Again, I encourage you to check out the other sessions that we have going on throughout the week in Career Week. I'll put our full schedule into the chat here, so you can engage with more sessions. If you found this helpful, you can see what else we have going on, both in person and online. Thank you again, Steph, for being here. We really appreciate it. And I'll leave a little bit of time for more questions. Otherwise, I will close this Zoom room out.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me today. And I wish you all the best in your career design journeys.